Hello, this is Nintendo Players UK's podcast, episode 11, and it's a special. I am Jen, I am co-founder of Nintendo North Wales and head admin of Nintendo Players UK, and today I have with me James and Townie. James and Townie, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, no worries. Everyone calls me Townie. My real name is Jonathan Town. I'm not a townie. I don't go uptown drinking. And I was at Nintendo UK. I did a couple of roles actually. I was in marketing for a little while, looking after cardboard and point of sale that went into retail. It was quite good fun. But then I became what at the time was the first community manager, as far as I know, globally. Interestingly, so I was not global. Sorry, I was community manager and social media manager for NUK between the years of 2000, like 2011 and 2015. It's about 4 years, 4 and a bit years.
Cool. What about you, James?
What about me? Yeah, my name's James Bowden. Otherwise online in a lot of circles known as Dan and Ash. I worked at Nintendo UK as a social and community manager. As Tony says, interestingly, like he basically made that role while he was there. But I sort of took over the role from February 2015 to September 2019. I loaded up LinkedIn just to look at that. And I rarely go on that website. But there you go. That was
all a while ago now, because everything was pre-lockdown, of course, and everything was a lifetime ago. So that wasn't your first forage into Nintendo, was it? So could you tell me how you were first introduced to Nintendo?
Are you going first?
Do you want me to go first?
You go first, yeah.
Just generally, oh God. Well, I mean, I'm not shy of my age. I'm 46 years old now, so I was playing video games, I don't know, like 1982 or something, back when I think in the UK, certainly from a UK perspective, I didn't get much sight of things like NES. It was in boots, in the 80s, but nobody had one. We all had, the classic British tale of Spectrums and Commodore 64s, things like that. So for me, first time I really got to play on a Nintendo console of any kind was when the import Japanese Super Nintendo came out, because a lot of my friends had it. I couldn't afford it, but I was very jealous. And they had things like Mario World and F-Zero and all those brilliant games. But at that time, I used to go to a computer club, and they had a NES there, and they had Mario 3. And I don't know if it's a good story or not, but I genuinely thought Mario 3 came out after Mario World for many years because that was new when I first saw it. So, the answer to the question really is it was really SNES that introduced me to Nintendo. It was Mario World, it was F-Zero. I really loved those games, but I had a Mega Drive, so a boo.
Oh. What about you, James?
What about me? Actually, I owe my earliest interactions with Nintendo to my sister, who is a sort of 4 years older than me for most of the year, 5 years for a little bit. But like, she got the original Nintendo for a Christmas. I should catch up with her as to why, as to what like prompted her to want a Nintendo. But like, she got it with the classic Mario Brothers Duck Hunt double cartridge. Oh, by the way, because Tony said his age, so for full transparency, I'm 35. So spring chicken. But so my sister got that, and I played a bit of that. But then again, my sister got a Super Nintendo, so I played a whole chunk of that. And it was sort of one summer I pretty much just like, it was a big deal that I set the SNES up in my room and spent a lot of time playing it. So much that I wanted an N64 for that Christmas, but I was playing the SNES rather than doing my homework, and I got grounded and couldn't have an N64 for the first Christmas it was out in the UK. Which probably would have bankrupted my parents, to be fair, given the price of that thing when it first launched. But so I got grounded. I was a fairly casual player of consoles up to that point. Like, we had them. I played them. There was the odd franchise that I latched onto, but I wasn't like actively looking at games and news. Weirdly, one of the franchises I latched onto was Donkey Kong Country. I weirdly remember I remember going into Woolworths. That's showing my age, and just like seeing Donkey Kong Country 3 on a shelf. And imagine like having no idea that there is a third Donkey Kong Country, like, and loving the previous two games. Just walk into a shop and seeing a third game and just be like, "This is the best day ever! Look at this!" But yeah, and weirdly, the game I got grounded for was because I was playing the Game Boy Killer Instinct in a Super Nintendo. Not a good game to get grounded over, I can be honest. But that's quite amusing given where I work now. But then it was the N64 was because I was a year late getting that, so I spent a lot of time going around friends playing theirs, and it was like that was when I started. When I got one for the Christmas, it came with Mario 64, Diddy Kong Racing, GoldenEye, and Banjo-Kazooie. And then that was when I started buying a magazine, and then I got Zelda in the January, and so like that combination of games with buying a magazine, that was where I sort of just fell deep into playing too many games. So yeah, that's really where it kind of became a problem.
Just a funny old tale with the N64 was, to your point, James. I think back then, because the internet wasn't really a thing, and you kind of learned about games through magazines, right? And you didn't, or word of mouth, or you just going in shops and being surprised. Remember when the N64 first came out in Japan, we had an import shop. We were lucky where I lived in Wakefield and Leeds. We had a lot of import gaming and shops, and it was quite normal. Like, it wasn't like special. Well, it was special, obviously, but it was ordinary to us, I suppose. I always remember the N64 coming out in Japan, and they had it in the shop, and I couldn't afford it because I was a post student. So I traded my life away for this N64. Took everything I could find to get, because it was Mario Kart 64 they had, and a Japanese N64. And I was so excited by this console. And I was sat in the train station looking at the box. Do you remember? You used to like look in the box, the instructions and stuff. I got on the wrong train. I didn't realize I was on the wrong train until I ended up in a totally the wrong city, nowhere near my house, as a post student. And I had to get off this train and get a bus. So what would have taken me half an hour to get home took me something like 5 hours. All the while carrying this brand new N64, thinking, I just want to get home. All I want to do is get home and play Mario Kart. That's it. That's all I wanted to do. And I got home hours later, and my best mate Ben, he'd been waiting for this moment, and he came round and he said to me, "Oh, I play Mario Kart then, 2-player." I was like, "Oh yeah, 2 pads. Yeah." I'd forgotten to buy a second pad. So I basically went straight back out. It must have taken me something like 12 hours just to buy an N64 and 2 controllers. But let me tell you, that summer was amazing. That's all
unforgettable. Yeah, so Mario Kart is actually one of the reasons my community came to be. But what led you to the community side of gaming yourself?
I mean, for me personally, I think this is a really easy question in that I grew up around arcades, so amusement arcades. You know, we were lucky again. Wakefield's not a seaside town, and I've no idea to this day why we had 3 or 4 good arcades in Wakefield, the worst city on earth. We had like a classic dingy arcade that was the back of a record shop called Jack Records, and you walked through a record shop and kids could get in. You know, you could get in there if you were like 5 years old. They wouldn't kick you out. And you'd walk in this dark arcade, and they had Outrun and Shinobi and all these sorts of really classic games. That's where the community began for me, because you were with people, you stood around, you were borrowing 10p off somebody when you'd run out of money, you were taking it in turns, you were competing, high scores. You know, all these games that I love to this day were in this arcade. And then when you were 16 years old, you could get in the older arcade, the more posh one that you could only get in if you were 16. Well, it's meant to be 18, I think. It had fruit machines. Can't remember actually, was it 16 or 18? Anyway, that was another one, and they had, Street Fighter 2 in there when it just come out, and you start playing Street Fighter 2, and then that becomes an amazing experience because you got to know people. I think, James will probably certify this, but Street Fighter 2 is one of the best two-player community experiences. I mean, at the time, it was everybody was talking about it. That was the game, and it had 6 buttons, and we were all confused by the 6 buttons. So we were used to having two. But that's where, for me, it's definitely an arcade game, and it's. I feel quite, if I'm honest, I feel quite disconnected from online gaming, and I know people love it, and I get why they love it, and I'm not being derogatory towards it as a thing. It's not my thing. I prefer to be with people, sat on a sofa, or sat in an environment, and I think that's why the whole Nintendo community stuff that we went on to do together really appealed to me, because it was real people in a real place. Again, for the record, online gaming is brilliant. I love everything that it does, but it's just not my personality. It's not where I'm at, and so yes, that answer. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, that's brilliant. What about you, James?
Obviously, I was born after the death of arcades, or grew up after the death of arcades, which is a real shame because I would have loved to have been old enough to have been part of like a local Street Fighter scene or something. But that, I think that it was mostly that competitive side of gaming that is what like led to a lot of those sort of friendships forming around games, especially with the N64 and the GameCube allowing for like 4 players. A lot of my birthdays were my birthday is in the depths of winter. But like, my mum would be like, "Oh, what do you want to do?" I'm like, "I want to plug a console into the living room TV, just have some friends over and just play games and eat pizza." Just and like literally, spending an evening bouncing between Mario Kart and Smash, and we were never really big on Mario Party, but like F-Zero, Monkey Ball, blah blah blah. Like, you just competing and learning to be better and sharing things about games, like friendships can really blossom around those like shared interests. Obviously they do, and I think video games are a really easy one for that to happen around, especially competitive games, because it's all about sharing tricks and trying to one up each other. So there was a lot of time with that, but then just sort of all throughout growing up, there's always been these little moments, like when I went to college. Weirdly, the college I went to, in the sort of coffee shop they had 3 Xboxes, and they were often playing a game on LAN. So like Halo was a big one. Halo was the main one, to be fair. But like, you'd go in there and you just pick up a controller and just start playing and chatting with the people that are there, and it's like you're all picking up a controller, so you all know that you have a mutual like an enjoyment of video game. So you just you play it together and you start talking about it and you start to form those friendships. And I remember even then, like, some of us started to bring in DSs and play Mario Kart, just all sat around the tables. I would occasionally bring in a console and put it on the TV. Discovered someone that was outrageously good at Smash Brothers. And he would basically like 1v3 many of us and humble us constantly. But that was one of those big ones where, because someone would often be like, "Oh, do you play Smash Brothers?" And I'd be like, yeah, I play Smash Brothers. I'm okay. And actually, I would say I'm quite good. But like, this person, like, yeah, I'm okay. And he just absolutely batters me. But like, that's immediately like, right, friendship formed, because I want to play this game with you more. And like, we like this, and I can like, we can bond over this. I think that's ultimately what's kept me interested in gaming communities, because I love that instant we can bond over this and become friends and share this enjoyment of this thing. Whether that is, and nowadays, whether that is high competition in something like Smash Bros or Mario Kart or Street Fighter, or whether that is sort of more casual, look at my house in Animal Crossing, look at my town. Like, that is in itself is boasting about what you've achieved, but like I remember when I worked in Tesco when I was growing up, the woman who worked in the non-food in the electronics bit, she played Animal Crossing. She and her son played Animal Crossing on the GameCube all the time, and I'd always talk to her about how her Animal Crossing town was going. And like it's amazing to have those points of connection with people through the games you're playing.
You know, on the Halo point, I just had a flashback which I'd totally forgotten about. When I lived as a student, we three of us lived in this house. One of bizarrely, my mate who owned the house turned the downstairs living room into his bedroom, and because he wanted more lodgers to save money, we had Xboxes LAN linked through the house, so you could. And regularly we'd have Halo nights, and people would come round, and you'd have a team downstairs, a team in one of the bedrooms where our mate was. But if you remember Halo 1, I'm not sure if you can remember the setup. You couldn't have 4 teams on LAN link. So I think it only split into 2. I think it's Halo 2 when you could do that. So effectively, you could pick your color of your team, but you were kind of on the same team as the other color because it wouldn't divide you up. So you had to just do a gentleman's agreement that what you wouldn't do was kill each other to get points on your own team. There was like a bit of a flaw in the team setup. I always remember you could cheat by killing your team members and getting points for doing it. It was all a bit bizarre. Brilliant though. Really good times. And sorry, in a bit of a tangent, the last thing is you talk about Animal Crossing and showing off your house. I'd never show off my house, but do you remember at that little town when you street passed people and you could get their houses? When we were lucky enough to go over to E3 for a few years, I've still got it now. I've still got the 3DS downstairs, and you could lock the houses, couldn't you? So they could never get wiped. I've got Eguchi's house. So was he the producer or creator? There's that lady who's the co-creator. Can't remember her name. We've got Miyamoto's house. I've got like basically every Nintendo sort of biggish star you can name in my little village. But one of them, the lady whose name I forgot, which is very bad. The lady who is like the co-producer or co-director of Animal Crossing, her house is insane. It's all gold. Like everything in it is gold. And I think you can buy gold things, can't you? If you like her entire house is like the whole house, when you've expanded it, like to ginormous house. Yeah, but everything in it's gold. It's bonkers.
So this is me Googling on the side. Is it Kyogoku?
I love the Animal Crossing New Leaf one because I had a massive chessboard in the basement with a grand piano in the middle of it.
Brilliant.
That's my star piece.
Animal Crossing actually is one of my most favourite Nintendo memories because it came out while I was working there, and it was at the time when Nintendo would give every employee a copy of the game, regardless of who you were. So finance people got the game, everybody did, and they said to us, what we want you to do, because it was a month before it came out, is we want you all to play it so you understand it. So by the time we get round to talking about it in public or the press or whatever, everyone knows all about this game. So we literally got paid to sit around playing Animal Crossing every day for about a month. And because as you know, you trade, if you've got apples and someone else's starting village has got a different kind of fruit, you get more bells if you trade. Our trading in the office was amazing. You got everything so fast because everybody had it every day. That's genuinely one of my most favorite memories of Nintendo, just sitting around playing.
Once the Street Pass communities existed, we got that exact situation where you could immediately trade all your fruits for each other's fruits.
It's brilliant.
We made sure we sorted that out at the nearest opportunity for when New Horizons came out as well.
Yeah, I love that.
But yeah, so I've got a slightly longer question for you guys now. So this was from Paul, who's on committee as the social media team. So when you were Nintendo UK community manager, if you could have held a tournament or competition for a niche Nintendo game that's close to your heart, what would it have been?
It's such a difficult question. Do you know what? In all honesty, my memory is so bad at the minute when I think back. I don't know if we did this anyway. I can't genuinely remember if we did this or not. Someone help me out if we did this. But I really loved Kid Icarus on 3DS.
You did. There was a whole HMV thing. It was around HMVs.
Oh, we did do it. It would have been that if we hadn't already done it. Because that game is so cool, and I just think it's brilliantly misunderstood and not quite didn't quite get the reach that we would have hoped. But then again, it was a bit of a funny to play, wasn't it? But and I'm
So many
left-handed. I
cans.
found it super hard to play, but I still loved it. Oh God, a niche Nintendo game, James. If you've got one, please go ahead.
Oh, no.
Well, I think.
I was worried you were going to bounce that at me. The
Yeah.
funny thing is, Kid Icarus Uprising is literally the game that I like. That was one of the main games I was playing when I formed Street Pass Manchester, and it was because I wanted to play that game. Like, that's a really good example of like, I want to play this game live in person with people, because the online of it was like, well, this is fine, but I'm getting lobbed up against like random people, and I'm on a team with random people, and I can't talk to people, and I can't like shout at people and air my frustrations, but also like go, oh my God, your build is wicked. Like, can I actually have a look at your screen? What weapon have you got? How have you set up all your abilities? Like, so like it is a bit of a cop out right now, but like Kid Icarus Uprising is literally like one of the games that I would have loved to have seen go further and done a tournament for, because I just think, especially like nowadays when you have all your shoutcasters and stuff like taking things apart, like it would be an amazing game to actually have someone being like, oh, and so uses beam claws with these abilities, got to watch out for this. Like, it feels so set up for a modern audience, yet
It was ahead of its time.
yeah. But the online infrastructure, the online wasn't there. Like, if you could go on Kid Icarus Online and say, me and my two friends are teaming up, put us against other organized teams, like, we might be in a position where we're playing Kid Icarus 3 and Splatoon didn't get made, which is maybe a horrible scenario for some people. Some people might absolutely hate that, but I kind of feel like there's a lot of what became Splatoon. There's some of that DNA in Kid Icarus Uprising, I kind of feel. Especially when you look at like Nintendo trying to do a shooter. But if we're trying to think of another game, I'm going to think of another game. Have you thought of one now, Tony?
Yeah, I've got one.
Okay, cool.
It's a dream. It's a dream choice, right? A game that I really loved, and I don't know how it'd work. And I'm imagining Nintendo have taken this game and they've added some kind of multiplayer to it that is feasible. Do you remember Blast Core on N64? Right?
Yeah.
What a game that is. And it lends itself very much to competitive play because it's all about the points and the medals and how effective you're smashing through the buildings and have you ever played it, Jen?
I've never played it, no.
No. You basically a bunch of like demolition guys, and you control different vehicles, and it's a bit of it starts off quite easy, and you have to knock buildings down and smash things to bits. That's the game. But different vehicles do different things or affect buildings in different ways, and it's a bit like Pilot Wings mixed with I don't know, because in Pilot Wings, you master vehicles, don't you? And you get points for how good you can fly and all that. I think Blast Core, had they expanded on it, could have been such a great multiplayer game. So if I'm allowed, I'm gonna pick Blast Core, but a version of it that doesn't exist.
Okay.
Destructive Pilot Wings. Destructive Pilot Wings is how I've described that game to some people. It really is, and it's a good game. Play it on Rare Replay. If I was picking, I think the one I would like be interested to do a tournament for, and this would be really hard just because it would end up being quite slow. I don't think. Thing is, some people would describe this franchise as niche, whereas I think people who are more into Nintendo don't see it as such. But Advance Wars, well, and I'm fully aware that the remake of 1 and 2 like just came out, but everyone kind of ignored it, I feel.
I've just finished the first one on the remake.
Oh, have you?
Yeah. I've never played it until now. I love it. I think it's great.
Oh, that's really good. I mean, they're advertised as strategy games. A lot of people kind of one strategy aficionado that I know, and I know Townie knows, refers to them as puzzle games, which is really interesting. You know exactly who I'm talking about.
Is it Ash?
Yeah, it's actually yeah.
Let's name drop Ash.
S name of Ashley Day. But the thing is, as soon as you play Advance Wars in multiplayer, it stops being the kind of puzzle game that the single player is, because the single player is much more about like you can kind of work out exactly how the computer's going to behave, so it's more just the counterplay. Whereas as soon as you put that game into multiplayer, you are like both trying to slowly shuffle units around, and it does become much more this game of like baiting and switching, and it is kind of slow. But the game I would have it on is not the remake or like Advance Wars 1 and 2. It is Advance Wars, I think it's Dark Conflict on the DS, because it had the most sort of most like direct attempt to balance CO powers. Because, and if you know Advance Wars, I'm sorry, I'm just going to talk about mechanics, but in Advance Wars, COs have an ability, and in most Advance Wars games, that ability just affects like the entire map. So like Andy repairs all his units, another CO, like all his units are cheaper for a round, another CO, like all his air units get buffed. But Dark Conflict had a tweak to that mechanic where the CO would appear on the map and have like an area of effect, and it basically like the CO power would work there until they got taken out, and it basically gave it a bit more balance. And I actually probably am quite outspoken in enjoying that game in the franchise a bit more than most. It did try and go for a dark and gritty art style, and that kind of backfired, and everyone wanted the sort of more jovial vibe of the previous games. And I think that's why Nintendo has shied away from everything that game tried to do, despite some of things like CO powers working quite well. This is all to say less Fire Emblem, more Advance Wars.
Fair enough.
If you want to go niche, Battalion Wars.
God, yeah, Christ. I mean, I think because I think the original question, Jen, was it niche? Was it what niche sort of game would you bring to like community as a tournament or
yeah?
Okay.
Pretty
See,
much.
my brain defaults when I think of like a niche Nintendo game, things like that. Well, not niche as such, but I straight away think of games I love like Star Fox, things like that, and then you think it's crappy multiplayer though, isn't it? Like you just wouldn't do it. It's okay, but it's not like a world-beating multiplayer experience. So it's the same with like F-Zero. F-Zero 1 on SNES. What you can't. I don't think you even can play it at all. Does it have a split screen? I don't think it does.
I think it does. No.
No.
But then F-Zero X is just like everyone complains there's no weapons in it.
Yeah,
I think Advance Wars tournament would be very good. I mean, everyone would have to, sit around for ages while everyone shuffles their troops around. But there's a lot to talk about. It could be good.
Yeah, do it. You should do that.
Sweet, let's go.
Oh, committee will bear that in mind. So, going on to when you were actually the managers, what game did you personally enjoy working with or promoting during your actual time at Nintendo UK? What was your favourite?
Do you know, the answer to this could be a cop-out. Because I loved working at Nintendo. I mean, I really loved it. It was a moment in time never to be repeated. And I think that could be, it wouldn't have to have been the time I was there. It could be any time at Nintendo, really. But because I was there I joined at the back end of Wii. So the first things I did, the first answer to the question would be, my brain straight away thinks of Skyward Sword, because that's the first game that I was ever worked on. And but it wasn't as a community manager, it was as the POS pusher. So I was making cardboard and posters and standees, and we dressed Oxford Street Game in like fake grass and put trees in it for the launch and things like that. And at the time, I loved it. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I also made my first mistake while working on that game, because I had to make a poster that had the review scores on it, and it had, all these 10 out of 10s and everything. And the poster went to print, and it went to everybody. It went to like Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Game, everywhere. And it had a quote on it that says something like, best game ever made, or something, whatever it is. Then underneath it said CVG magazine, 10 out of 10. And the product manager very helpfully informed me that CVG, Computer and Video Games, hadn't been a magazine for about 10 years. It was a website. So, and I remember just looking at him thinking, oh, yeah, because I remember it as a magazine, because in the 80s and 90s, it was a magazine. I didn't realize for some reason that they'd shut the magazine down. So we had this poster out there. Nobody ever mentioned it. I was just like, do you know what? Just use them. We've printed all these posters, just use them. And nobody mentioned it. But I'm sure some like nerdy people probably went into a shop and went, oh, Nintendo don't know what they're doing. It's not even a magazine. So that was a brilliant mistake. I loved that. But then from a community manager point of view, I think, we did, to James's point, I can kind of half remember Kid Icarus. Mario Kart was brilliant because that's which one did we use in the end?
Mario Kart 7 was in 2012 because that's when I met you.
Yes, right. We definitely did the Wii one as well because I was there through Wii as well. R.I.P. Wii. I love Wii, for the record. I love it. Still do. But I think it's sad, but I've got. Don't make me talk too much about this. I'll just go on for hours on end. But I think Wii as a product, it was sad. We all knew it had brilliant games, but still nobody was buying it. And you can Google why did Wii fail till your fingers like fall off. But everyone's got an opinion, right? But
yeah, everyone and their gran had a Wii though, so it sold
well
as far as consumer was bothered.
And, I've got an opinion. I might be wrong or right or wrong. I don't know. But at face value, we were trying to sell a console that was £100 more than the competition that had more games that more people wanted on it. But it didn't alter the fact that when we went to E3 and they unveiled Mario Kart 8 and 3D World and some of those other games, we were all sat there thinking, this is it, guys. It's going to be flying off the shelves tomorrow. And of course, it never happened. But then you look at the goodness that came from that era is now on Switch. And I wouldn't begrudge anybody who's got a Switch and plays those games because I'm really happy that they've got to, more people. That's Wii was just the prototype, really, wasn't it, at the end of the day? But so to answer the question, though, to go back and stop being an old man going off on a tangent, I would honestly say if I had to pick, if you put me at gunpoint and said choose one of the games that you loved the most, it'd honestly be Animal Crossing. Like there's everything about that game appeals to me. I love it, and I think people are surprised when I say Animal Crossing because it just the right looks but there's a lot of obsession in Animal Crossing. I'm an obsessive tick boxer in gaming, and there's about a bazillion tick boxes you can do in Animal Crossing, and I love just collecting things and getting stuff and just having that game and going out and doing the street pass stuff. And to your point earlier, doing the trading and all that. I loved working on all of that. I don't think we ever did a tournament because I'm pretty sure you can't compete in Animal Crossing to that level.
We've done a fishing tournament in Animal Crossing.
Fishing tournaments, yeah, true.
That was North versus South.
But I think, there's favourites, which are my personal favourites. And then there's sort of proudest, I guess, what I thought, oh my God, this is really working for us as a community. Not me personally, but generally. I remember in Manchester, it was Custard Factory, wasn't it? That Mario Kart. Birmingham, yeah. My memory again. That was that feeling of everyone's here. Everyone's travelled. We're all playing this game. It's brilliant. Nintendo were there. I was there, but there were other people from Nintendo there. I just think that was a moment in time for us all where you really start to think the community's come together and because of this game and because of the 3DS and all of that's really great stuff. And, James played a huge part. Jen, obviously you did. Everyone did. All the guys, I can't name them all off the top of my head, and I won't want to because I'll forget one and then they'll complain at me. But
I was so anxious that day, but it's still one of my best memories in my lifetime, pretty much.
So good. I really loved that day. So I'd pick Mario Kart as the most heartwarming, wow, community coming together moment. Personal favourites, Animal Crossing. And then the first thing I worked on was Skyward Sword, so I'm gonna have 3. So you'll just have to
top 3, love it. Okay, let's hear from James then.
Okay, it's really funny, like thinking about how many games you do end up working on in any, I was going to say in any given year, in any given month. It's just games, constantly games. And it's like, when I think back to my time at Nintendo, like, I obviously worked on a lot of really cool games. Amongst those was stuff like Breath of the Wild and the whole Switch launch, and Smash Brothers. I worked on Smash for Wii U and Smash Ultimate before I started off. I worked on several Monster Hunters in collaboration with people at Capcom. Like, it's a very privileged position to be in, to get to work on so many good titles, and then you get to work on stuff like Triforce Heroes and Federation Force and Yokai Watch and Teddy Together, which are all great games in their own right. They've got really interesting things about them. But yeah, it's a full-on role to be dealing with so many games. It's sometimes you get to sit and play them. Sometimes you just have to, write tweets based on screenshots. But it's all good.
Yes.
I think if I was to pick a couple of standouts from my time there, like, even though as Tanya was saying, the Wii U was a system that struggled, like, one of my favorite games to work on was absolutely Mario Maker, because that is a game that had community is at the core of that game, and what you can come up with is at the core of that game, and just seeing creativity from everywhere, being able to toy around with that game, and then just where you're working internally, being able to highlight the best levels you play. And it was one of those where me and Ash did actually do live streams from the Nintendo UK office, which was quite a rare thing, and we were trusted to do that. And we even had Charles Martinet on one of the episodes, and I tried to remake a 2D version of Womp's Fortress, and having him narrating as you run through it was
amazing.
Totally surreal. And as I say, just an absolute privilege to be able to do that and show that game off. And then again, once the game had come out, being able to kind of see it through and then celebrate the best of what the community is doing. That game was phenomenal. And this is my humble brag moment, I'm sorry, I even got to make a level in that game on behalf of Aardman, but that level had to go to Japan for feedback, from the Mario team. And everyone was giving me absolute horror stories before I sent it over. They were like, "No, they're super strict. They send back reams of, they've just come back to some people and said, no, start again." And I was on the 3rd version of my level at this point, because I'd just been so unhappy with what I'd done. Sent it over, one piece of A4, couple of add some blocks here, and I was like, way. I think they were just tired of Mario Maker by that point, though, to be fair. They were just what's with these weird, what's this sheet? Just put the level in the game. Sounds like a humble brag. But then Splatoon, and more precisely Splatoon 2, was probably my other major highlight. And that's because, as well as helping bring this franchise out in what little way I did, being in the UK, I think the way we kind of pushed the competitive scene of that game and supported them in such early days still is something that brought me a lot of satisfaction and a lot of appreciation. And to see them still hosting community lands now, it genuinely it's really heartwarming for me that community is still going and getting bigger and still hosting their own personal stuff beyond Nintendo now, and seeing that Splatoon is this pillar for those people. For those people, what is Smash Brothers for me that game that I played in my mid-teens, going into and like meeting friends through that. Like I see that Splatoon is that game for some of these. I was going to say kids. They're in their 20s now and they've got jobs. And I see them on Twitter, and I'm like,
still
no,
kids
you
to us,
you were a small, tiny human. I saw you competing. But yeah, and like we had the producer over as well to like see one of our UK finals, and that was amazing. And yeah, just seeing that community go from 0 to European to world championships, like that was really incredible to see that. Oh, and Arms, I'm shouting out Arms.
Oh yes, they're all expecting you to
and everyone should love it. And that's my very personal pick. I don't consider that niche. That's why I didn't call it out earlier when you said about a tournament.
Some might call it niche, others might not. Depends on perspective for that one, I think.
But I think Arms was a fun one because I remember I did a video for Pokken Tournament when it was first released on the Wii U, and I remember putting the video up on Nintendo socials, and it was a combo video, and it was like synced to music, and there were literally people in the replies going like, all right, who did Nintendo contact to put this together? And I'm like, oh, just me in the evening, just like messing around on my capture card. And like that's really funny when you get that sort of stuff. And then again, similar to Splatoon, to be able to work on Arms, Townie knows I love fighting games. To be able to work on a new fighting game franchise and sort of help introduce that, even though it's a pretty peculiar one and doesn't fit a lot of the traditional expectations of a fighting game, like still to see people loving that game and to see excitement about it and to see them like reacting to community things you do in a positive way and being able to support them is like that's where the real satisfaction of the job comes from.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there's so many games that bring the community together. That's why I love being part of a community myself as well. So what was your journey like moving forward since your position at Nintendo UK? What have you done since your Nintendo days?
Well, my answer to this is nowhere near as cool as what James is doing now. So you can
Let's
have
hear it though.
Mine's relatively boring, I suppose. Actually, no, it's quite funny. It's sort of funny. It was sad, but looking back, and it was the right thing to do. I left Nintendo primarily because it was during the Wii U. We'd been there a while doing Wii U, and it was not doing very well. Switch wasn't a thing at this point. It hadn't even been announced. And a lot of my really close friends at Nintendo had started to move on, get other jobs in the industry, and the office was just different. I'm not saying it was worse, it was just different, right? And when sort of a dynamic changes, you start to look at yourself and think, well, maybe it's my time. I don't know. Should I leave? And a recruiter have kept phoning me up saying, "Oh, do you want to come and work at DeLonghi and Kenwood, who make coffee machines, obviously in kitchen mixers?" And I was like, "No, why on earth would I leave Nintendo to go work and market flipping coffee machines? Are you mental?" And they basically kept ringing me every other week and making a better offer, like higher and higher offer. And it was because they're based in Havant, which no disrespect to anyone who lives in Havant, but it's not very nice. The council could do a lot better with that place. So their head office is about an hour and a bit from my house, and it's quite a trek from London. So they were looking for somebody with big brand experience. And when I say big brand, brands and they wanted somebody to do social media because they didn't really know much about it. So me living in Basingstoke with Nintendo, and by that time I'd also worked at creative agencies. I'd worked at Game, who were a huge retailer, obviously, back in the day. And yeah, for all my sins, I said yes. Eventually, I was like, yeah, cool. I'll leave Nintendo and go market some coffee machines. And then the story continues. Obviously, I hated it because I was like, this is the most boring job I've ever had. And without using any bad language, let's just say my boss wasn't a very nice man. And I told him where he could stick his job. after 9 months. I literally walked out. I quit on the spot and walked out. And Game, who, for those who don't know me, I worked at Game Station Game for a long time. I started work there in something like 1998, in the shops, working in game shops. And I'd always had a lot of time for those guys. I'd grown up with it. When Game Station was bought by Game, they moved us down south. It was through Game that I started working on the Nintendo account. It was through Game that I ultimately ended up getting to know the guys at Nintendo and ultimately ended up working there. So I never have a bad word to say about well, unless they've done something really rubbish. But that's every company on earth, isn't it? And so when I walked out of my boring DeLonghi job, wondering what I was going to do next, Game found out and very nicely phoned me up and said, "Do you want to come back?" And they offered me a job running their trade marketing team, and I went back to Game in 2015. I mean, I'd only been left Nintendo at this point by about 8 months. So I didn't last very long in kitchen mixers and coffee industry. I went straight back to gaming. I was at Game for 5 years, about doing that job. It was brilliant, loved it. Working with all the publishers. I was back working with Nintendo again, but we're doing Xbox, PlayStation, everything. And obviously, what happened was lockdown. A lot of things changed during COVID for businesses. Ultimately, I was made redundant, and I ended up working. I've got 2 kids who are very young. I didn't really want to get a job with a lot of travel involved, so I don't want to go into London, places like that. So very close to home, 10 minutes from my house. There's a company that nobody's heard of. Don't Google it, it's not that exciting. They're now called TD Synex. They were called Tech Data, but the short version of this is we're the biggest IT and technology distributor in the world. Believe it or not, it's a massive company. But instead of doing marketing for Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo, I'm now looking at companies like it's Dell, it's Microsoft Windows, it's Lenovo laptops, it's routers, servers. It's flipping everything to do with technology. And actually, some of it is actually quite, to be fair, quite interesting. We're dealing with VR, so we're doing the Meta headsets. We do a lot to do with AI technology, which is fascinating, actually. But the job itself, of course, is never going to be as fun and exciting and as interesting as Nintendo. It never will be. But that's what I'm doing now. I'm doing marketing for technology. It's a good job, to be fair. The people are nice. I'm working with people I used to work with in gaming as well. A few people are there with me. And my 2 kids, my little boy Henry, he's just turned 6 and he's obsessed with Mario Party. So I'm actually in the middle of a Mario Party game right now. So we don't get me wrong, I might not be in the industry as it were, but I'm still playing games. I'm still, as much time as I can. I'm playing Pikmin 4 at the minute on Switch, loving it. Mario Party, I've got my arcade gaming room. Find me on Twitter. No, I'm joking.
Gamer for life and all that, yeah.
So yeah, that's where I'm at, and I think it's really important just to say, life has moved on a little bit for me in terms of I'm not in the games industry, but I will never not love video games. I always have my whole life, and nothing's ever going to change there.
Awesome. So, James, what about you?
Well, slightly less turbulent than Downey. There's no dramatic storming out of rooms, or at least not to leave jobs or anything. No, I obviously I'd spent quite a while at Nintendo, but obviously, like, the key difference is when you're working at Nintendo UK, you are working in the UK office of Nintendo. You're doing marketing and you're working with the community, which is super fun. But like a lot of people, I wanted to just be that little bit closer to actual game development, like, because you are very far from it when you're working at Nintendo UK. A couple of the teams will actually reach out. Like, I remember the Splatoon team reached out for opinions on things, but it was very rare. And so I was looking for a job. I was as Townie said, it was sort of fuse into the Switch. A few people were like leaving Nintendo UK, and that does, as Tony said, it just changes the vibe of an office. It feels different, and when an office feels different, it can feel it doesn't feel like the home that you're used to, and that means you start looking around. And I did put him for a couple of positions, and they were all much closer to home in terms of like the actual development teams, because as I say, I wanted to be closer to a team. But then like the Rare so the job at Rare, the social job appeared, and it was like, I don't think any Nintendo kid that like grew up with the SNES N64, like that era, I don't think any Nintendo fan would not be a Rare fan as well. I think that would be quite hard. So the idea of going to work at Rare, which was like another of like my major childhood dream studios, was sort of one of those which is like, this is too good to pass up. I can't not go for this, because it helped that I love Sea of Thieves, which is an online game. Sorry, Townie. But it is, that whole concept of going to a pirate sandbox, it felt very true to Rare's the sort of N64 era Rare. And I was loving playing it, and the idea, just that idea of going and A, being closer to a dev team, and B, only having a couple at most projects to focus on, was really appealing. Because as I say, at Nintendo, you do get those games that you keep looking at, and they're always on and they're always of interest, but you are working on a lot of titles when you're working for a console publisher. You are talking about a lot of games, and your focus is very split, and you're working on loads of different things. And it's one of the hardest things about being community manager at Nintendo, is because actually there is a Nintendo community, but there is an Animal Crossing community, and a Mario Kart community, and a Smash community, and a Monster Hunter community, etc., etc. Like, every individual franchise is its own beast, and it's hard to feel like you're giving everything you got. So I think it really appealed to me to go somewhere like Rare, where I could give the Sea of Thieves community much more attention and focus, and like I feel like I have been able to do that. And it's really cool working in a studio. I've been able to say, I want to run this contest on social, and I want people to be able to get an in-game item for that, which means an item gets added to the game, and I help name it, and I help do things, and I feel like I've had like more of an impact in what Sea of Thieves is, whilst also having a super cool, direct and strong connection to its community, and talking to them. That it's fulfilled what I wanted to get more of. And as Tony says, that's not to say that I haven't continued to play and love Nintendo, like, and I love stepping back and being a fan now. Like, I knew so much about Breath of the Wild before playing it properly, and like, I'd see NDA things which spoil story points for games, and you'd read and you'd learn about mechanics and stuff that were super late into games. And actually, like, I love Nintendo so much that I am more than happy to be that step back and just be able to enjoy all of those games on that platform. Like, the Mario Wonder Direct, revealing when we're recording this, the Mario Wonder Direct got announced today. I don't want to watch that. I know I'm going to play a new 2D Mario.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm going to play it through with my boy. And so I don't want spoilers for that. I want to play that unspoiled.
James, sorry to interrupt you. What were those things called at Nintendo? So they had Jenny. They had these. They were like documents that told you everything about a game. I can't remember what they were called, and it was like a PDF full of pages, like the instruction book, but more than the instruction book. And it'd tell you all the secrets and all the characters, and you could read it and literally just spoil the entire game for yourself. I can't remember what they were called though. They had a name.
I can't remember the name either.
and read them, and you'd be reading them going, "Oh my god, there's like this character's an unlock and all this," but you couldn't do anything with that information because you'd get fired, you know. But I've totally forgot the name of them. They've got like some kind of, they had a literal name, but never mind. But they were brilliant. And what I used to do, I don't know about you, but I'm the same. You don't want to spoil that information, the fun of sometimes. So you just wait until you'd hammered the game for weeks on end, and then you'd get that document out and go, what am I missing? You know, like what? I used to love looking at those.
They were just like ultimate cheat sheets. They were really cool. But yeah, I can't think of what the name was. But like when one landed in your inbox, it was like, oh.
Of all like the Zelda games, I had to buy the walkthroughs because I didn't have the patience to work it out myself.
I think that the Nintendo is so funny, and to James's point, I think it's not to be underestimated how secretive they are as a company. They're very Japanese, they're very insular, but they're also, for the right reasons, probably they don't trust hardly anybody with information. So you would literally at Nintendo sometimes find out something about 2 hours before the rest of the world did. And everyone would be like messaging you going, "Oh my god, have you played this game that's just been announced?" Like, no, because I've just found out as well that it exists.
Yeah, like some of the shadow drops in directs, you wouldn't know about them. It's so funny. And like I think it was the Tears of the Kingdom tease that was like at the end of E3, one of their E3s. Was it like 5 years ago now or something? 4 or 5 years ago? But like literally like 3 people knew that was there. Like it's so I'm talking about, you know, obviously more people knew, but broadly speaking, like in your you had to like go 4 or 5 steps up the chain to find someone that was like, oh yeah, I knew a thing was on the end. They didn't know what it was, but they knew a thing was getting added to the actual broadcast. And it's like, oh yeah, like these 2 people knew exactly what it was. Like, you know, you got to do that.
It's funny because the one I always remember the most was when they slipped up. Well, they didn't slip up. I can't remember the exact scenario, but Majora's Mask on 3DS was about to be announced, and they decided not to. And I can't remember why. There was some reason for not announcing it. They decided to delay it by 6 months or 7 months or something like that. Oh, that was it. I remember now. It was April Fool's Day, and they were going to do an April Fool's where we were going to put out, because everybody had been saying, why isn't Majora's Mask out on 3DS? So we were going to do an April Fool's tweet and say, Majora's Mask coming to 3DS, and everyone would go, April Fool, Nintendo. And then, like, the next day would go, no, it's real. Here's the trailer. Ha ha ha, fooled you. And Nintendo lastminute.com, so I think this idea came from, I want to say from America or somewhere like that. Nintendo just went, we don't want to do it because we feel like it is not being nice to our customers, you know, fooling them like that and all this. And we were like, no, that's what we do in the West. It's funny. That's funny. Let's do it. But they wouldn't have, they were having none of it. So they delayed it for a long time. And I remember that's the only time I think I've ever worked in all my time at Nintendo where I knew something of that scale for a long period of time. And you'd be like walking around with this information in your head going, don't tell anyone about like Majora's Mask on 3DS. It doesn't sound like a lot now, but at the time it was just knowing that at Nintendo was quite a big thing because I reckon you probably a month is probably the longest time you'd probably get roughly on anything big. And even then you'd be super lucky. It'd normally be like 2 days before or a day before. So I was walking around. I probably told you, James, I reckon at the time. I probably did tell, like, don't tell anyone about these things.
You've always got a couple of people who you're like, yeah.
You've just got to tell someone, haven't you? Otherwise it eats you up inside.
I think I remember you telling me about Tetris 99 before that came out, James, because I'm a big Tetris fan, so...
No, I didn't. What are you talking about? I think those documents, were they PIBs? Product in brief? Product in brief?
PIBs. Yeah, PIB. Yeah, that's right.
It sound anything but brief, though.
Yeah, well, it was basically product in bullet points. But yeah, they were fun.
Yeah, they were good. They weren't a walkthrough. They were just the unlocks and the secrets, and what you could and couldn't get, and how many levels there were, that kind of stuff. And if I look back on what's the 3DS Mario Land, Mario 3D Land. Do you remember when that came out? I don't know, James, you'll have played it. Jen, I don't know if you've played it to the end, but what it does, the first half of the game, if you think you finished it, and then it kind of you get the game again, well, more games, like double the game. But the reviewers were allowed to talk about the second half of the game. So if you read any reviews of Mario 3D Land from that time, you'll find they're a bit 7 out of 10. They're a bit like, oh, it's all right, but it's not very long, that kind of thing. But because they weren't allowed to tell people stupidly that the game was double the length that you thought it was. And I always thought that was a really silly embargo, a really like daft kind of restriction to put on reviewers, to not be able to tell people the game's awesome because it's bigger than you think. So the Nintendo did do really weird things, and like the PIB document for that was like, oh, look at this massive game, and we were reading the reviews going, well, this is clearly wrong. And they just do such bizarre things sometimes. Nintendo, they make such good games, but there was quite a few years where I think they didn't really understand communities and marketing and people, and how people talk about games is a good thing. They wanted to do things as a surprise, and that was their thing, surprise and delight. And it was only, I think, in recent years, particularly James, when you were there and you were saying how they allowed you to do live streaming or whatever it was on Mario Party. The fact that we had a community manager was quite a big deal for Nintendo. Having a person who was allowed to talk to people, none of this is to be underestimated. And I think had we put a foot in the wrong place, it'd have all been shut down pretty quick.
Yeah, because it was funny when I attended the the Splatoon European Championships and stuff at the finals there. It's really funny going to that because a lot of the other markets, so like the French rep, Spain and stuff, you'd find the person from Nintendo that was with the teams, and you talk to them, and it would be like, oh, so what's your actual role? And they'd be like, oh, I'm the product manager. They would be the person who is responsible for everything about the game and the whole marketing of the game and where it appears on TV. But they are also the person that has to organize the tournament for the game, or at least book an agency to do it, because they don't have a community manager. And I think that's why you found that the UK one was as robust as it was, especially for Splatoon 2, in terms of having multiple stages and having the final at Insomnia and things like that, was because you had people like myself and Luke as our events manager knuckling down and having that sort of as a project. So we were able to do that, and we weren't just the person who's marketing Splatoon and is also marketing these 4 or 5 other things at the same time. So it's
quite a I would say it's quite a privilege being able to do it. But if we've got time, the bit of a background, I just wanted to just give you a bit of a background on this. And James, I'm not sure how much of this you know. I think you know all of this, but the way that the community came about in the UK from a Nintendo point of view, we weren't allowed to do it technically. The UK office was not allowed to do what we did. And the only reason we got away with it was there's a crazy guy at Nintendo, Jose. Right. Jose Martinez, who was my boss. I think he was your boss when you joined. He had some brilliant ideas, and he loved this community aspect, right? And he had this idea, and I can't remember which way around it was. I genuinely can't. He had an idea for National Street Pass Day. So his idea was,
I wonder where that came from.
Yeah, let's do this National Street Pass Day, and we'll get everyone. But I think the idea of it at the time was to have hubs in certain cities where Nintendo would rock up with a stand, and they would have all this official stuff, and you would go there and you would meet people, and it'd be all under this Nintendo umbrella of safety. So what Nintendo didn't like was Nintendo putting their name to something they couldn't control. So if you said Nintendo officially endorses Street Pass Preston or something, and then something bad happened at that event, from their point of view, they were a bit worried about the PR that might gather. So we covertly managed to get around this by two ways we did it, actually. We had a UK Facebook page, right, for Nintendo. I think now it's globalized. I think it's been merged and it's all one now, and it's just they put out the English content to England and things like that. We geo-locked the Facebook page, right? Because at the time, Nintendo of Europe would give us the things to put on social media. They'd literally give you it. They'd go, post this. And it'd be really boring, Here is the new pack shot for this game. Thanks. And you couldn't comment on it because comments were switched off. You weren't allowed to have a chat. You weren't allowed to do anything. And it even said, Nintendo does not reply to anybody or something in the disclaimer. So the first thing we did was we went, right, what we want to do is talk to people. Like, this is stupid. Why aren't we talking to people? We as Nintendo would love to be able to talk to people. So we geo-locked the UK Facebook page so the European NOE couldn't see what we were doing. So what we were doing, we were posting on UK localized content in the UK only, telling Facebook to only show it to people in the UK. And the European adults couldn't see what we were doing. So we started doing not even that good content. We wanted to see what would happen if we did some more human content. And so we were taking pictures of plush toys in bushes and putting them on the Facebook page and going, check out this picture of Yoshi or whatever. And people were starting to talk and go, wow, Nintendo's like a real person, it's not just a computer. And that was kind of the beginning of it, where we thought, well, that's a good idea. And then we quite rapidly realized Facebook can also do events, right? I'm not sure these days how good or bad it is, but certainly then, if you didn't have the budget or the authorization to make a website to host events, you definitely could do it on the sly on Facebook using the events page. So I spent a long time searching Facebook for you guys. Basically, I just spent weeks just going street pass, pressing enter on Facebook search and seeing what I could see. And we found all the communities we could. So we found Street Pass Manchester. Obviously, you would fly in at that point. You had you had the biggest, I think, amount of people.
Yeah.
So James, for anyone listening who doesn't, James was running this huge Street Pass community in Manchester at the time. I'll let you speak on your behalf, but where I'm going with this is we found all these communities, but what we realized quite quickly was a lot of them weren't speaking to each other. So that's what we wanted to try and help with. Now, James, I think anyway, you were having a similar thought process without what we were doing. We had no idea James was thinking similar thoughts. But what we did do, because we're very undercover and very, very sly, we realized we had a budget to spend, right? So we'd been given a bunch of money from the Nintendo 3DS budget to do this community building. So I got my mate Glenn, who's a graphic designer, to make a website. And I said to him, don't make it look like Nintendo have made it. The key thing here is it can't look like we've made it. You've just got to, you can use the assets, do whatever you want, but it cannot be anything to do with Nintendo or it'll get shut down. So he made this website and I paid him using Nintendo's money as like an invoice, but it said, not what it was. And we made this website. And I think, James, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I then phoned you up and went, James, I've made you a website. Do you want it? Because you already had a website that weren't functionally quite as effective.
Yeah, I had a rudimentary website going on with my not particularly trained skills in WordPress wrangling. But yeah, you were pretty much just like, do you want a website? I was like, okay.
Yeah. So we gave you the website, which is still active today, which is brilliant. And
well, we're back on WordPress now. You'd be interested to know, James.
It's good.
For a while, it was custom Linux.
I can't, I don't know the ins and outs of it. All I said to Glenn was, I don't want to know. All I want you to do is make it. We'll pay you. It cannot have any comebacks to us because we don't want anyone to know. The reason we needed that, of course, was if you organise events through the Street Pass UK, as it were, website, then it's nothing to do with Nintendo. It's nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
But then we had visibility of all these events. So then what we were able to do was see what was going on and actually go to the events. This was the best bit of the job at the time. It was beautiful. we had a budget, and they basically paid for me to just go to events and bring with me gifts and nice things, and it wasn't about, and it's a really important point for me. It wasn't about me. It was about the fact that Nintendo had let me go and give away all this stuff and help, and we'd pay for the venues, or we'd pay for the food, and that bit was above board, by the way. They knew we were doing that. They knew we were doing things like giving away giveaways to communities. And what they didn't realize was the Street Pass UK website, we'd made it. But I think all of that sort of behind the scenes stuff, eventually the European office said, hang on a minute, what have you done to your Facebook page? Can we see it? And we all went, yeah, maybe. Sure, you can see it. And they went and looked through it, and brilliantly, they decided that what we'd been doing was good, and they wanted us to carry on doing more of it. So for a while, the UK were able to input into the social media strategy of Europe, because we had that element of humanness, I suppose, that they quite liked. And they realised it weren't damaging, which is good. And I think that opened the door really to what came next, where they finally realised you're not going to have a PR disaster just because you've got normal people talking about Nintendo games. Because generally, Nintendo self-moderates. So if you put, let's say it's Zelda, you put a post on about a new Zelda game, there's always some, what's a nice word for an idiot? There's always some idiot, right? Who will say something like, here's Nintendo milking Zelda again, or something like that, or something more offensive. The community then moderates it for you by getting involved and going, shut up, it's brilliant, I'm really looking forward to it, I love it. So we'd got to a point where we were on purpose leaving the negative comments, because we didn't want to be police. We didn't want to be delete everything bad and only leave good, because that in itself is a bad thing to do. And I think we sort of learned as we went that we just kind of got the hang of doing it, I suppose. And I think, James is sitting there nice and quiet, which I appreciate, but it's the significance of James and what he was doing at that time as well, because you helped me out so much in what you were doing. And, I think, yes, he ended up at Nintendo. When I left, took my job, like 10-second rule straight in. But I think, you were instrumental to the whole thing in that you agreed to help us. You did, you'd get my phone calls just out of the blue. James, I want your help with this. Can you set this up for us? And, I think we made a great, for a few years, we definitely did a great thing for Nintendo in the UK. And I'm really proud of everything we did. And I always remember, the last thing I'll say is, we'd been doing this for a few months, and Nintendo used to have this on a Tuesday, I think, a meeting every Tuesday morning. What's it called, James? Like the like the company.
The meeting in the morning.
There was anyway. Everyone went in the boardroom, and people would present things, and they'd say, "Here's the next new game. Here's our marketing plan." And they asked me to present what we'd been doing with the community. And we went in, and I had a PowerPoint that I'd spent a lot of hours on. And it was a picture of the UK, and it animated, because I'm pretty good on PowerPoint, right? And all the different communities that we'd managed to engage with and sort of recruit into this, I suppose, I don't know how to call it, the community, into the community. They all appeared on the map, and each one said how many people roughly were in the group at the minute, like 20 here. You had whatever it was, a few hundred. You were on there, Jen, of course.
Yeah.
They were all on there. And it all added up to this brilliant number of players. And then you said, well, all of these people love Nintendo that much that they're all getting together. And here's a huge number of community people that we've met. If you think all of them are also talking to their mates and the influence we've got, and it's not just about, this person who goes to this event. What about their friends who don't do that? They still talk to each other, and they still have a good time, and they still promote Nintendo. And I think we just got this brilliant picture of, we finally managed to find the people, like, as in, instead of just, up until that point, we've just been talking at people. It'd just been Nintendo going, here's some information, have it, don't talk back. Excuse me. But now we had this community of people who we were listening to, and that was a big swap in everything. We were genuinely listening. We wanted to know what people thought. We wanted to promote this on social media. He wanted to show people what was going on, and it was a beautiful thing. And we got that day a standing ovation or a round of applause in the meeting. And if you were, I don't know if you know, Jen, if you know Roger Langford, the world's most miserable person from Melbourne, one of my best friends, for the record, love him. He always, to this day, he always says to me, "Do you remember that time you got a standing ovation in the Nintendo, whatever the meeting was called?" It's like a big deal, and really, like I said, just sorry for rambling a bit about it, but that background of what we did, it really changed Nintendo. And if you were cynical, you'd just say, "Well, everyone else was doing that. You know, Xbox were doing that kind of stuff. They were talking to people. Yeah, they were, but Nintendo were never like that, and they never had been."
You paved the way. But it's interesting now, Nintendo is seen as the family getting together brand, whereas Xbox is still seen as teenagers in the bedrooms.
Yeah, a little bit. Nintendo were always funny because they were a little bit, don't want to say fake, but it was all a bit PR shots, families in a nice living room, a massive living room that no one's got, playing Wii miles apart from each other, you know, having a good time, and celebrities. And there's a place for that, I think. And I think that look and feel is really good for families when you go, if you want your parents to buy video games. But we were trying to appeal to people who really played video games. I think it was a bit of a different angle on it. And, you know, both can exist together. But, it was so good, though, wasn't it? You know, I'd love to go
10
back.
years ago. So we've moved on a whole generation now, our community group.
Bonkers.
And everyone's early 20s again. And I'm towards 40. But there we go. Anyway,
can I
round this off now? So thanks for you two to come in to talk to me today. I hope you enjoyed the session.
What was Tony? You were about to ask something. What were you?
I had a really last-minute question, right? So just
Go
a quick. Do you still wear your top hat, James? And have you still got it?
Oh, this one.
Oh, there it is. That's how I remember you at all of the events.
Well, the story of how that came about is on my podcast.
Oh, there's the plug.
Oh, I'll need to listen to that then.
Yeah. Yes, no, I do still have that. That's still. I found it actually. I was wearing a purple one on the podcast, but I found that in Isaac's room. Don't know why it was in there.
Isaac takes after you, evidently. Get him in a top hat as soon as possible. Anyway, thanks for being on the session tonight, and
it's great.
See you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Fun. Thank you, and keep enjoying the events.
Yes.
Thank you.